and they're sort of allowing them to ignore other important cues that might be there. So the strategies that we have found to be most useful involves, number one, the single most important thing, and again, Dr. Marcus, Dr. Ellman, please interrupt me if you think this is not correct, but is everyone in this room should have absolutely a number, a blood glucose number, in which they agree, no matter what the hell else is going on, you're going to stop what you're doing and take action.
30.
And thus the problem. But the remarkable thing is lots of people don't have a number at all. So the people we meet who are having, the unreasonably fearless folks I meet, like I remember one, and these are often, oddly enough, physicians with type 1 diabetes. And I remember the last guy I talked to, and I said, at what number would you treat a low blood sugar? Would you stop what you're doing and say, you know what, I need to do something about this? And he said the one statement that is the most diagnostic that tells me there's a problem. And he said, well, it depends. And I said, really? It depends. And now I realize the CGM world has changed to some degree. But he said, it depends. I said, well, it depends on what? And he said, well, there's 6 major factors. What did I eat recently? What am I doing at this point? How soon might I eat again? How much insulin did I recently take? How am I feeling about X, Y, Z? And he had this list. And I said, okay, so let me just make sure I understand this. Your blood sugar is 40. And you're having this fascinating, interesting conversation with yourself, carefully evaluating the interaction of 6 major factors to decide whether or not it might be appropriate for you to do something or to continue what you're doing. And he said, absolutely. And that works out just perfectly for me. Now his wife is sitting in the room going, so everyone here has to have a number. It doesn't mean you have to have a high number, 30 is a bit low, but you should have at least a number where you always are going to agree you're going to do something. What's remarkable is how many people don't have a number. They just, again, just not as extreme as the example I'm saying, but do something like that. And it's a number, and you have to agree that it's sort of the opposite of what we learned from Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. Don't trust your feelings. Trust that number. That is a number at which you take action no matter how you feel. And I would say it out loud a million times if you believe that number. And discuss it with your physician. Discuss it with your family members. They should have a number. Steve, what do you think?
Oh, I think that's good, but I think now that most of us have CGM devices, I think that the trend arrows are pretty important because that changes the number. Because if you're 80 and you have 2 arrows going straight down, that's like, your blood sugar is probably a lot lower because of the lag. Even if it's a short lag, you really need to jump on things fast compared to 80 and a trend arrow cross or diagonal going down. So I think that's something that we all have to sort of learn with ourselves.
Well, you're actually saying there's additional time. There's additional time, so of course you're going to take action. And Steve and I, we ride bikes together a lot, and so he's always pulling out his CGM, and we talk about it. But there's always going to be a number, regardless, on a CGM, you're going to say, I better stop and check my meter, or I'm going to stop and do something. There's a lower number which you're going to do that, no matter whether the arrows are going up or down. Right? So that's what I mean. It's sort of been I'm not saying this is how you're going to manage your life. I'm just saying there's an emergency number.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I just want to mention 2 others. Another one is this thing we do called blood glucose awareness training. Now, I actually don't do this formally much anymore because every time we try to do a program on this, we actually never get enough people to come. So I guess that means there's no problem. Again, blood glucose awareness training is a program we've done for more than 2 decades. There's tons and tons and tons of research. It's actually kind of funny. The last time I tried to do a program like this, and we had about 15 people sign up, and I was so excited about people who really want to do something about making sure they can be safe from hypoglycemia. And we had all these people show up. I was thrilled. And I went around the room and asked them who they were. None of them had diabetes. But they were all really worried about hypoglycemia. I was so annoyed. I said, get out of here. But just to let you know, so I don't mean to advertise this because I'm not actually sure what we're going to do moving forward. I'll tell you some of the highlights. But again, the point is, everyone here needs to be, and can be, if you're having a problem with reduced awareness, of being a better guesser. And my one truly impressive doctor slide is this one. Just to let you know that I'm not making this up. There's actually been more than a dozen careful randomized control trials from around the world that really show when you do what we call formal BGAT, formal blood glucose awareness training, you can really help people profoundly, you can't see this in the back, but reduce how fearful they are about hypoglycemia, reduce episodes of severe hypoglycemia, and something near and dear to all these studies is reduce driving problems and driving mishaps. So there's lots of evidence that stuff works. To boil it down though, one of the major things we do is we just want people to practice guessing. So that means for at least a couple weeks, what we typically say is, and I was just talking to someone today about why don't we have an app for this, it would be so much easier. Just to, every time, for a couple weeks, before you check your blood sugars, take a guess. Write down your guess and then check. And by the way, don't poke your finger and then guess. Because what we discover is people are much better guessers after they poke their finger. And they're not even aware that they're estimating on the color of the blood. So you have to do it before you poke. And then keep a written record. And then what we typically do is we look at what your quote-unquote good guesses are and quote-unquote bad guesses are. And that typically means let's look at every time you actually were below some threshold, say below 70 or below 60 or maybe below 100 because you're trying to keep things up a little bit. And then if you were below your magic number, let's say it's 70, and maybe that happened 10 times in the past week, of those 10 times, how many times did you guess you were under 70? Now, I don't care if you guessed you were 10 or 69, but the point is, did you guess you were in danger, that you probably needed to do something? And then how many times were you inaccurate? And then we look at that, and we begin to build better diary forms, because then we say, well, why did you make that guess? What were you thinking about? What did you notice? And we begin to identify what are the unique ways you can do that, predict your unique symptoms. And if people don't have any symptoms, again, we have an extra problem when people are too smart because they're mentally compensating too well. We ask them to find ways to begin to challenge themselves to look for brain sputtering cues. So I'll give you two examples. One was a mathematician. And the only way he figured out whether he was low is if he suspected he might be low, he would start to do his times table. He would do his 13s, which is even tough for me now, making 26 or 30. And he would do up to 13 times 13. And it turns out he always could do that well. But he would notice sometimes when he would do it, it was slower. And he could tell, he said, boy, that seemed to take a long time. I better check my blood sugars. So that was his warning sign. Sometimes it's more subtle. I had a carpenter, and he noticed, he began to realize he could tell when he was low, not because his mind was slowing down, but because his motor movements were beginning to crap out. And he was starting to drop nails. And he said, anytime I drop more than 2 nails, I'm going to check my blood sugars. Someone else who worked a lot in an office, they would write a lot, and they said, when my handwriting starts to deteriorate, I would check my blood sugars. So it could be motor movements, fine motor movements, and it could be the way they're thinking. Other people say, I'm having a conversation, and notice I'm just slightly having the trouble finding the right words. But catching it early, seeing if that's a unique cue for you, can really help people to become better guessers, which is how we help people regain confidence, some confidence in their body. And then finally, it's really important to make good use of your loved ones. A lot of the problems we see with people struggling around lows is that if your spouse or partner or family member says, hey, I think you might be a little low, the immediate response is what we call the I'm fine syndrome, right? No problem, I'm okay. And in fact, not only am I fine, I think I'm actually a little low, and I'm certainly not going to let you know. So I'm definitely not going to check my blood sugar, and I'm definitely not going to tell you. And so we see things getting worse just because I'm fine. So, and what we find, the solution, we've done this countless times, is when we bring couples together and negotiate, what do you want to do when you're low? How do you want your spouse to deal with this? What do you need? How can we make this work? And I would say 90% of the time, everybody comes to the exact same strategy, which is usually some version of, okay, look, here's the deal. If you think I'm low and you put a glass of juice in front of me, as long as you don't say anything, I'll drink it. Now, I don't know why that seems to be the most attractive solution, but that seems to be. But it's a matter of having that conversation that's key. And by the way, if you're having trouble having that conversation, as some of you know, I'm actually a big proponent of what we call the diabetes police. And this is the issue where family members become, coming from a place of love, they just care so much. But unfortunately, their way of caring sometimes backfires. Oops, let me come back to that in a moment. Because, you know, if you as a person with diabetes start to feel that what should be experienced as love is actually you just being nagged, you begin to think, well, my independence is being impinged upon. And I'm an independent soul. And if you think you need to check my blood sugars, then I definitely will never check my blood sugars. So you tend to do the opposite. You become sort of a diabetes criminal, which leads to your family worrying more, and they become more diabetes policemen, and you end up working against each other, even though everybody means well. You see the same thing with parents and teenagers, probably even worse.
We call that the leave me the F alone syndrome.
Leave me the F alone? Yeah. And so it's very tough for everybody. That's why you need to have a conversation when you're not low about it. Yes, sir?
What is that lady, what, please?
He said, leave me the F alone.
Oh.
I have no idea what he means by that. You have to ask. So, and just to toot our own horn, by the way, if you haven't seen it, one of the ways we think this is important to address is many years ago, as we saw how much trouble folks were having bringing this up with their loved ones, someone finally said to me, wouldn't it be great if we could have a little wallet card where we could just sort of hand it to our family members or loved ones or other people who annoy us about diabetes, and just say politely to them, oh, you must not know the rules about how to behave. And suggest they read this. So we actually have these. This is a little accordion card. I think I brought like about 10 in case you want one. But they're just these little cards. And, you know, rule number 1 is the most important one. Don't offer unsolicited advice about my eating or other aspects of diabetes. There's things about testing here. Actually, my favorite one is number 3. I bet some of you are aware of this one. Don't tell me horror stories about your grandmother or other people with diabetes. So I'll show you our website, but these are freely downloadable if you want one. And then let me just switch subjects for a minute before I stop. But then there's this other big problem, which Steve was really talking about, these folks who are unreasonably fearless. We think this is a really big problem, but we don't know because no one's really ever looked at this. And as Steve mentioned in the fellow who I saw, getting people to make changes here is extremely difficult. When you get the strong belief that the only way I can stay safe is to keep my A1C under 6% or 5.5%, that's a hard one to argue. Especially when you're saying, actually, you're going to be a whole lot safer if you can keep that number higher. But we know that's true. It's just a hard one when you've had it beaten into you, the lower the better, the lower the better, the lower the better, for so many years. And I hope when we talk more, we can talk about this non-linear relationship between A1C and complications. You actually don't gain a lot of safety when you move from, say, 6.5% to 6%. You gain a lot if you go from 8 to 7. So the big one is all this conversation about A1C target, that everybody here compromises. Steve, he talked about his own A1C. Everyone here compromises. You want to have the best blood sugar control possible. You don't want to have any horribly scary, deadly low blood sugars. And you also want to have a life. And everyone, whether you do it consciously or not, compromises to find the best blood sugar level, A1C level, that will work and fit for you. And there's no reason it has to be the same for everybody. And then we also have to figure out, when we're working with folks like this, how do we help them make use of their relationships, their family members, friends, spouses, partners, because they're usually the motivational force who just don't want you to die and are terrified beyond belief. And how do we help them get involved, engaged in a way that doesn't feel like we're being diabetes police? So this is what we think about and worry about a lot. We don't feel particularly successful. It's really, really hard. Steve also mentioned, when we talk about nighttime problems, there is some evidence. I've always seen it from old Italian studies that if you can help people really do a phenomenally good job avoiding low blood sugars for a period of 2 weeks or so, you begin to regain at least some of your cues. You actually see less reduced hypoglycemic awareness. Oddly enough, the studies were done before we even had CGM, but there seems to be some evidence, although I don't see much of it followed up about. We've already talked about we should only be talking about CGM. CGM changes the whole game. Everybody should have it. And it does, we know it can be a huge, we just have a study we're about to publish showing what a positive impact this has on relationships, although not for everybody, because this little device is annoying the heck out of partners and spouses. So I'm going to talk more about that. And then, of course, in addition to CGM, as Steve also mentioned, there is good old diabetes alert dogs now. Some of you may know the former Miss America and her new diabetes alert dog and her daughter. That's the dog in the middle. And the problem with diabetes dogs, some of you, if you know about this, is in addition to one of the many problems is that they're frightfully expensive to train. So this is just one of the places here in California. There's a number of these now all over the world. It's just Dogs for Diabetics, where they train these dogs to who we think, and there's some evidence they're actually smelling when you're low, and can help to alert you when you need that. They're making a big difference as well. But CGM is really what it's all about. Yes, ma'am.
Do you mind, this dog that I have here with me, we were one of the first prototypes in the U.S. about 9 to 10 years ago, before any of these dogs came out. She's ready to retire, but let's just say it's been a long journey for me. But what I can do is summarize a lot of experience. If you Google diabetes alert, tons of foundations will pop up. There's many people who should not be training or placing diabetic service dogs. So I just kind of want to throw that caution out there. I'm real clear because I'm in the industry, like, yep, no. But I would only actually recommend about 3 in the US right now. And that's from personal part of the whole international foundation. Anyway, I don't mean to throw it down. I'm just saying it's very complicated, but there's a lot of people who should not be training or placing.
I hope we will.
And I do know Dogs for Diabetics. They're in Northern California, and I know the executive people, he calls himself like the principal or something, but they're a foundation too.
Yeah, and I don't know any of them.
Which 3 do you recommend?
Name the 3.
I recommend Dogs for Diabetics. I would say that you have to meet certain criteria. I know from talking from Mark, Mark, the problem why people need a dog is because they're so afraid of the loads that they run high oftentimes. And certain foundations will only take you if you run like in the 6s. But that kind of defeats the problem. Anyway, it gets very psychologically complex sometimes. Dogs for Diabetics, I would say if you live up north, go into it, yeah. I would kind of recommend them, but just be aware that, like anything, it may or may not work out. I recommend
Who's your favorite?
Rita Martinez in the Antioch, Oakley area up north. She's nationally the best that I've ever worked with.
What's it called?
She's called Clicking Canines. If you Google Rita Martinez, she is, in my opinion, the best in the U.S. And then she is training diabetic foundations correctly now. And she's working with, they're in New Mexico, Assistance Dogs International. You don't want to go with anybody who's not accredited with ADI, Assistance Dogs International, because they have the highest ethical standards, and we're an international committee. But I think it's called like Guide Dogs of the Southwest. But again, they're being trained by Rita too, so.
That's
Sorry,
great.
I don't mean to steal that.
No, that's.
It's just
I know
been
so
a
little
long,
about this. Thank
long
you.
history.
I hope you'll tell us more.
Who's the 3rd one?
That was the
I would go for the Dogs for Diabetics, but you have to live in their area and up north. And the one lady who was like second command broke off from them, so I'm not sure what happened. That happens in the industry. She's up there too, so I can't speak for her. I would just say,
Rita Martinez, the person to find something.
yeah, I would start with her.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
So I know you're getting tired of us, so I want to hear your questions. So, oh, I forgot. By the way, I have a favor to ask. If you are a spouse or partner of someone with type 1 diabetes, I need your help. So just in case, I'm going to pass out a little flyer. We're just looking for people to fill out an anonymous online survey about what's freaking you out about being a spouse or partner of someone with type 1 diabetes. And you can't look. So I'm just going to pass these out. It's just a little information about what this study's about and what the URL to find it. This is what we're using to build a free online program that'll be available next year to address some of the special issues of type 1 spouses or partners with type 1 diabetes. So if you know of any folks, I didn't actually bring enough flyers, so you don't need one, don't worry about it. If you do, we'd sure appreciate it. This is just a picture of our website. If you don't know about the Behavioral Diabetes Institute, we have all sorts of programs and classes, usually weekend programs. If you ever run into psychological behavioral issues, come on down and visit with us. We're very proud of our programs, lots of free stuff, including our diabetes etiquette card and videos and things, so feel free to look. If you ever want to find us, by the way, this is how you do so. It's just www.behavioraldiabetes.org. Time is going fast, and we have important questions to answer, so thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
At this point, it says that I'm supposed to facilitate question and answer session. I don't think either of these gentlemen need me to facilitate anything, so ask away.
Well, if you don't mind, let's start with the two questions we had before,
Go ahead.
which I kind of forgot, but they were really good questions. Oh yeah, so Steve, one was about, what about the danger of taking sleep aids? And if someone's having problems with blows,
Step out.
she probably fell asleep out there.
She keeps her ambient supply out in the hallway. No, I would just say this, and of course, Alan Marcus is capable of answering any of these questions, but if you're in a deeper sleep, I'm just guessing it's going to be hindering your ability to wake up to a low. It's just common sense. I don't think there's any data on it.
The other question, and I know you have a very specific answer for this, what about for those folks who have a CGM and it doesn't wake them up?
Yeah, well, that's funny about what you said about partners, but I would say this. There's a couple suggestions. One is to put it on top of a metal can or tin cup, and it rattles a lot louder. And then the folks from Dexcom asked me to try out something that was, you can go to a hardware store, buy something that alarms really loud if someone breaks a window or is trying to break into your house. So you take a rubber band, you wrap it around this thing. But it was so loud that I had it on one night and it scared the heck out of me. And it was just too loud. But if that's just one suggestion, you could probably get other things that are not as loud, that set off with vibration. And that's a fail-proof one, because that'll wake up everybody in the whole building if you live in the apartment.
You know, I also wonder, and Alan, you may know about this, but I know no one's ever studied this, but I wonder if simply, for people who don't wake up, if we ask them to set their low alarm a little higher, if that might make it better. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
No, they actually, when I was in Metron, we looked, there was a study that was conducted where a basal visor allowed a decibel to wake up somebody, actually with type 1 diabetes for more than 15 years than it does for somebody who doesn't have type 1. So one of the issues is actually the sound creation. And not to say that it was a good thing or a bad thing, but the more sound that you generate, the more battery life that you use up. And so there's this commercial argument between how often people will want to recharge it and how loud you can make it and how much battery usage will be acceptable in the marketplace.
It was suggested that you put it on vibrate and put it in a glass next to your bed, and that will make a lot of noise.
So you say put it on vibrate and put it on a glass next to your bed. And that's, Steve, when you talked about something in a glass,
Yeah.
rather than on top of your Coke can.
Well, it's a metal cover to a candle. It's about this wide, it's only about this deep, so you can just lay it on top. And it does make a lot more noise. It rattles like crazy. So, and you can also put, you can always tape it to your ear or something.
So should this is a comment.
I just thinking on it. Well, my son is type 1 diabetes, and we had to take him off the CGM because of lots of false alarm during the night. The only thing I could rely on was double arrow down, double arrow up. Those were the two things that were always right. Just my question is, it seems like everybody else don't have that problem, and they're talking about alarm is an issue, but the numbers, for the last 3 years we tried, and I would say maybe 55% of the time we're accurate, but
What kind of sensor are you using?
the Medtronic one and the needle was pretty thick, and it creates scars.
Go for it, Steve.
I'm not going to say anything. Does anybody have any suggestions for her? Did you hear that?
Yeah, G4. G4 from Dexcom. I've just had it like for 2 days.
Who's your son's doctor?
Dr. Daniel.
Did they ever give you an option? Yeah, that's a problem.
Dr. Daniels is my son's endo, and we have a Dexcom sensor,
That's good.
so he's not pushing one.
Okay, good.
We have the same issues with the old Dexcom. We haven't moved up to the new one, but it wasn't,
Well,
wasn't accurate enough, especially at night. It was difficult.
You know what? You're right. The technology isn't there, but Gen 4 is better than the Gen 3, and the new Medtronic sensor is going to be better than their current one. So, and even the new Gen 4 is not perfect, but it is better. So, some people have better times with it than others. And who knows, there's something in the blood that we don't really recognize on touch sensors. And if you're really off on one brain, sometimes it's good just to try the other. So yeah, that's good. Let me move back here so we can. Here, I'll get this lady and then I'll come back to you over here.
Hi, thank you very much. I've had diabetes for 48 years. Started in New York with Dr. Dillard, who believed that your blood sugar should run high at all times because lows were dangerous. And then Jocelyn taught me that you shouldn't run high, you shouldn't run low. I think anyone who's had diabetes for probably more than 25 years has all the fears that have been put into us. It becomes part of you. But I had a question. Growing up, I heard about Richard Bernstein in New York and how tightly he wanted his people at 4.5. Do you see any data out of his patients with more dead in bed?
Much higher rate of dead in bed in his patients. I just made that up, but I found it. Richard Bernstein, you know what? He's a fanatic. He doesn't believe in insulin pumps, and I think what he does for himself is his own business. But the problem with him is he's not flexible. It's his way or the highway, and you can't eat his type of diet. Most people can't. I mean, I applaud the guy for being super on top of his diabetes, and I applaud you too for 48 years. Wow. So congratulations.
You guys are great. I mean, and you're so tuned in. I have a lot of different doctors that treat for the different parts of the disease, and if I come in, and for a while I was running at 6, and they go, "That's fabulous," and these were good doctors, and I think maybe there just needs to be a whole lot of education to the medical community.
Oh, that's for
because
sure.
all I keep hearing is, God, 6 is great, can you get to 5.8? Whoa, and so I don't think, we don't hear that from our doctors.
Well, that's, having a doctor saying that's great, that's a good start. Versus, oh gee, you're 8.5, that's not too bad, or something like that.
This is in regards to people not being able to hear the alerts. I've heard some people use a baby monitor, and that helps. And
You just stick it next to the
if you have a sensor or a
microphone.
CGM, you put it like a bedside it's close enough to you, or you put it there. And if you have somebody else, you work in the other room like you would with a baby monitor, or you can use maybe amplify it. I don't know which baby monitor works best, but I do know Medtronic. Dr. Marcus a while ago was looking into something called a Sentry, and that is available now.
Yeah.
So that helps some people. They amplify.
Yeah, the sleep monitors, you put it in your kid's room and you can keep it right by your bedside. So yeah, that is good. Okay, we got some folks over here.
By the way, I should mention, I've always like the opportunity to thank Dr. Bernstein, because as someone who talks a lot and does a lot of work with people who have diabetes burnout, he's really helped to create a lot of business for me. Driving so many people crazy. It's good times for me, so thank you.
Bill is very humble, but Bill is the only person in this entire world that has an honorary diabetes degree, which is defined as someone who really knows what it's like to have diabetes, but doesn't have diabetes himself or herself.
Where did I get that? Where did I get that degree from?
I think it was, yes, but you are the only person that's
Who gave it to
Is there a difference between the dead in bed syndrome and people that are on the pump and people that are on multiple injections?
I doubt anybody knows.
If you all heard that, no, there's no difference. That MDI and pumps, there's no one method puts you more at risk than others. Okay.
I just did a program with Dr. Feldman, by the way, recently, where this is exactly what I did. I got to stand up here and he would run around the room with a microphone. Very enjoyable.
Okay, and thank you for your website. I've been reading it and I really enjoy it. I'm a mother of a teenager with type 1. So, in a nutshell, I know it's grueling with the teenager, you know, they don't test or they don't take their insulin and they don't bolus and all that. So, and I'm going through diabetes burnout myself, being a parent of this teenager. So, is there an answer? I mean, is there really, what, I purposely step away. I mean, if he goes out and he doesn't take his tester with him, and he comes home and I notice he didn't have his tester all day, and you know, I don't talk about it because I'm tired of getting on his case. You know, because I feel if I'm more on his case, it's going to make it worse. Well, what do you do?
Well, as you know, you really are in an impossible situation, right? So if you don't stay on his case, you're an irresponsible parent. And if you do stay on his case, you're an obnoxious parent who's just going to make things worse. So anything you do is terrible, right? I mean, that's the problem. I mean, so this is why I don't like working with teenagers. They're too difficult. So I can tell you from my perspective, the only thing that we have found most well, typically we say to parents two things. Number one, wait them out, so hopefully they won't die until they get to an age where the light bulb, you know, the gray matter in their forebrain will grow and go, oh, whoa, maybe I'm supposed to do some of this stuff, but that will be like 20, 21 or something. So how do we kind of keep them together until then? And the thing we found most useful is when we have these, I would call them dispassionate family meetings to talk about chores. That type 1 diabetes is unfair, all the stuff you have to do sucks, it's unreasonable, but we always try to remind parents, you don't have to convince your kids to like it, because they won't. But we have to understand this is like chores. It's like taking out the garbage. It's like you got to go to school every day. I mean, how does that happen? What are the incentives, rewards, punishments to make that happen? Not in a mean way, but just these are chores. And when you can make it dispassionate, especially if an umpire, or, you know, third party, it's a little bit easier. I don't want to say it's magic, but it's a little bit easier. But that's the thing I would say that works best. It's hard to do that because you can't. It's hard to be dispassionate when you can't. But
I can add a little bit on there. I don't think there's one right way for every teenager, but I think what Bill said is true. Don't, you know, just, I like to suggest to parents that you got to back off to some degree and just make sure they don't kill themselves. Because a lot of parents think that, you know, a couple months, even a year or two of high blood sugar is going to cause complications, and it typically will not. And the other thing is, it doesn't work for everybody, but I've seen it work in some groups, like in San Diego, there's a thing called Diet Buddies, or Bill and I, through Linda Riley's organization, we did those sessions for teens and adult and parents, and that was fun. And sometimes a group of teens where they really can relate to each other, you know, they can learn from each other. And what's your son's name?
Stuart,
And how old is he?
14.
14.
And he goes to camp and he goes, well, my A1C is better than camp because camp is 16. I mean, they have some teens with A1Cs of 16, so he said, Mom, my A1C is better than all those.
Yes, I mean, I just say be as supportive as you can, prevent them from killing themselves, and then eventually, with the right support, but not too much overbearing, they will eventually realize that they want to take care of diabetes for themselves. And then, of course, the pediatric endocrinologist, are the ones that use the driver's license, and that sometimes can work too. Alan, any suggestions?
Age.
Age. Okay. Okay.
Can I say something on that real quick? I've been diabetic for 35 years, and so I got on when I was 3, and you know, I went through that teenage year too, and I know it was difficult for my mom and dad, and the one thing I can say, I'm here tonight because of my mom, so just support wherever you can. I know there were times that my mom, I know she was burned, I know she was, but I can say one thing about my mom is that she supported me, and she still does, my mom and dad, and my whole family really, but support, just be there.
She still sends you money?
She lives next door.
My name is Richard. Joanne and I have been together a little over 15 years. And when we got together, we were typically going through 2 cans or 3 cans of Welch's grapefruit juice and about 2 pounds of sugar a month, chasing blood sugars.
Thank you, Dr. Bernstein. Thank you, Dr. Bernstein.
No, and Joanne was very, very diligent, doing everything she could. As time's gone by, we were able to get a lot of data. Turns out the standard deviation was 70. So with that much, she could swing 210 up, 210 down on that.